Hello, welcome to the FESPA podcast, Up Close and Personal, with me, your host, Richard Askham, and my guest today, Kirk Lewis from HP. Hi, Kirk.
Hello, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. There's a slight time difference on our call today, so we'll try and work that out. By the end of this, we'll have it absolutely seamlessly nailed, so don't worry about that whatsoever. But Kirk, you're in the US today. Whereabouts are you in the US?
Sunny Florida,
Nice. Well,
just outside of St. Petersburg.
I'm in sunny UK. Look, I can prove it. There's sun on the side of my face. That's what the sun.
Look at that. Hopefully, you got some sunscreen on that side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very rarely do I cast a shadow at this time of year in the UK. So I'm very happy about that. But it's lovely to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to join me. Obviously, we're here to talk about personalization and predominantly this new event that FESPA are launching in May in Munich, Personalization Experience, a chance to get as many people from the 360 degrees of the world to come and have a conversation about what's next, really, for personalization. I feel as though we've started well, but now we need to sort of move on to the next chapter. And in doing so, Kirk, let me ask you the same question that I ask of all my guests. What does personalization mean to you?
That's a great question. I know one that I was sitting here thinking long and hard about. And I guess my answer is a relatively simple one, really. It's just about uniqueness and being able to express yourself in the way that you see fit, whatever that, and it means different things to different people. Personalization, to myself means that I want to be able to have, my computer in a certain color, my phone in a certain size, my pants in a certain wash, my car with a certain functionality on it. I want all the things unique to me, how I want to be able to express and make my life comfortable. So personalization means, I guess, in a word, about me.
So that's interesting then, because this is what I've discovered in various conversations that I wonder whether personalization is the right word to describe the opportunity, and individualization. It might be too long, but it's probably a little bit more appropriate, because one of the things I hear, Kirk, a lot is, "Oh, is that where you put your name on a bar of chocolate?" And it's like, well, that's one of them, certainly.
That's one of them.
It's certainly not all. You've just mentioned 3 or 4 or 5 things there in what you'd like to have as individual to you. So do you think if we could start this again and we say, okay, this is the individualized experience?
Yeah, the only thing is that doesn't quite, I guess, roll off the tongue as well as personalization, or maybe it's just a word that's not quite as handy. But I think that's what it is. Absolutely. I think more and more, I mean, it's really now becoming the fabric of our day-to-days is our personalized experience, right? I mean, obviously what we've been through in the last couple of years to where we're going, where a lot of us are very different sort of purchasers, buyers, and thinking about things that way. Our life-work balance, I think, has changed a lot. And I think having enjoyment, regardless of whether you're at the office or you're at home or your home is your office. I think what you're surrounding yourself with is a lot of those key things that help, get you through your day and put a smile on your face. And whether it be an experience out on a vacation, those are becoming more and more very specifically personalized to the stuff you bring with you on that to help you kind of continue that sort of that trend. I think is just growing more and more. I even look at the, not to get into the manufacturing side, but even where 3D manufacturing is going, right? We've taken it from, the really expensive, I'm going to build a bespoke, airplane part for doing some modeling on to be able I can have a tchotchke on my desk that's of me, an avatar, right? I mean, and I can have that at home and build it in 2 seconds. So I think the opportunity, I think, is significant out there. I think it's back to what we were talking about earlier on. How do we grow that and mass do it so at an affordability standpoint we can actually grow that and have our time to market more and more quick, right? So
yeah, I think that's the key question, isn't it? Because undoubtedly, and in my journeys around the sort of the print world in the last few years, speaking at events, it's undoubtedly true that capability exists. And I think when you look at it from a consumer perspective, willingness exists. So what's stopping it growing? Because it just feels as though we've reached a point and it's sort of stopped, and I don't know what the blocker is. What would you say needs to happen to really open the floodgate?
I talk to a lot of different customers. Some customers it's accessibility, right? Some customers it's knowledge, or there needs to be demystifying. How do I do it? Depending on your demographic. For example, talk to my grandmother versus my parents versus my cousins versus my aunts and uncles. Depending on what their relationship with technology, because a lot of this is interaction with technology, is sometimes could be a daunting task, or accessibility to that technology could be one that's a challenge, if you will. And also awareness. I mean, I think the demos, the younger the demographic is more into it, maybe than less the older demographic. I'm talking, kind of, the retirement age. Maybe they just can't be arsed to do it. I don't know. But I think there's some of that. Like you said, the capabilities there, manufacturing capacity, the ability to make these one-off bespoke, unique trinkets or whatever it is we're going to do, it's definitely been there for years. I think just making that simpler and easier and more ubiquitous, I think, is where I think the challenge really lies, right?
So do you think then, Kurt, with it's not necessarily willingness on our side to buy? Is the problem maybe the on the retail side? We can only buy what they sell, right? So we go to the store, whether that's online or bricks and mortar or whatever. Wherever we go, wherever we shop, we can only buy from them what they sell to us. And if they don't offer, and there's one of the biggest supermarket groups in the UK,
right.
When you type in personalized products into their search engine, the answer is 0. And right. Why is that? What's stopping them? What's stopping the big brands, the big retailers from seeing that capability that already exists?
Yeah, and maybe it's their ability to be able to figure out how they can make money off of it at scale, right? Because those big things are scale, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what they're the churn and burn, right? I want to sell 1,000 of this thing, and it's all the same, it's all the same. Versus I want to sell 1,000 unique ones, and how do I physically go do it? I mean, the supply chain is going to be slightly different. The time to manufacture is going to be slightly different, but those that can figure that out, I think, can do it and do it quite well. Loads of examples of that. I mean, look at maybe dropping some brand names here. There's shoe manufacturers out there that, you think in the last thing, how the heck did they figure out how to do that? Whether there's, it's a templated shoe that is a running shoe that looks the same. The colors are all different, but then the ability to actually take a photograph and put that on the shoe. And that's, they figured out how to do that because there was obviously a growing need from their market and the demos to be able to request that. Grocery store chains, maybe they're just not seeing the need as much as the apparel companies are. I mean, that's maybe one of them there, but it's definitely not capability and technology. I think it's more ease of use and be able to help support those manufacturers in doing it in a cost-effective way and at scale.
So is there a case then, would you say, because there's an argument, and it's not mine, but there's an argument that's put forward that the print industry in sort of gaining that capability has actually outrun its client. They've gone beyond their client, and as a result, the client doesn't understand the conversation that they're having. Is there a case for the print industry to stop developing for a moment, go back a little bit, and say, right, let me explain to you what it is that we can do, and have them go, oh, we had no idea you could do that. Because when if you only ever stay in your lane, you'll never have a conversation with anybody that's outside of your lane. One of the purposes of this show is to get all of those disparate voices together, and the outcome, everybody talks about what's the takeaway. The takeaway would be, oh, I had no idea that was even possible.
It's a good point, Rich. I think education's got to be constant, I think, in our world for sure. And learning from, like you said, just, getting out of your lane and learning new things to be able to offer new things to different customers for sure. There's an awareness of capability that maybe we have outrun things just a little bit. Maybe we have gotten too crazy as to all of us in this print world kind of live in our world and we know what we can and cannot do. And getting that out to the actual end user who's, waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning, has 30 minutes to go online and shop and get something, to understand what is and what is not capable. I think there's probably a lot of work we can do there to make that a little more effective, but also building things that people want to buy, not just personalizing them because you can, right? I mean, it's got to be purpose built. It's got to be unique in a sense that actually makes sense, not just, and I tongue in cheek, I don't want to build things that fill up landfills. Right. I mean, that kind of stuff's we got to stop that kind of work, because our consumers are getting a lot smarter too about carbon footprint. I don't want to buy things. And that's also back in lens to the personalization game, that I don't want that thing in black. I want that thing in a light gray with a shade of black or whatever it might be, to be able to be unique. So it is personalized and I keep it and don't end up filling up landfills. But back to your point. Yeah, I think education is going to be key, but also getting our customers in the print industry to get into new markets. Right. I mean, and how does that new market that they're jumping in for a new revenue stream, and does personalization lend itself inside of that? And I look at companies in the DTG space, direct to garment space, that's exploding with personalization at the moment, and more customers are getting into that. But, and I don't know about you, I've got T-shirts when I was, still 19, going to rock concerts and still have my original ones. While that wasn't a personalized T-shirt, it's a personalized experience, but you hang on to that. So the more we can get into that sort of thing and link those products to experiences, I think we're going to win on that journey as well of individualization or personalization, we're calling it.
Well, absolutely, and there's a huge difference between something being personalized and being personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always made this argument that your name actually is the least personal thing about you.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that's the most accessible, and people that don't know you can know what
Right.
you want from these sort of things and these sort of products and this sort of capability is for somebody to be able to take the thing that they know about you that is personal, put that on a garment, and then that you go to that rock concert, it was because you went together in the 80s, the 90s, whenever. And that's where the memory and the value sits, Kirk. And I think this is something that I want to talk about, with you in terms of the added value that emotive moment brings to both the consumer and to the brand. And what have you seen, on your travels with HP? What have you seen where it's very clear that the degree of personalization that's been used has had that emotional effect?
Oh, geez. Well, talking to a lot of consumers in the printing space that are working with brands upstream or brands themselves, and or actually even my family themselves. I mean, when you can get it to, I think of the example of the avatar a lot because a lot's and I just had some calls with a customer here. It's about that journey, your origin story, if you will. So whether you were, born a traditional way that you were typically brought into this world, or maybe it was a different type of an upbringing, being able to document that and outline that to the son, the child, themselves as they kind of grow through their childhood, I think is extremely important. A lot of customers and brands that are obviously using our technology from an HP standpoint are harnessing into that. And I think that's a great example of being able to take something that's, your upbringing, your journey, your life, your origin story, and bringing that to personalized. It doesn't have to be just print, but in this case, it was a book. I think it's a great example of how that is a one-off unique snowflake. But being able to do that at scale, right? Because they can do that at scale through technology, I think has really been successful. As a consumer, as a parent, as someone in that, that's you'd pay anything for that, right? I mean, that's almost priceless, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's a unique thing to my son, my daughter, what have you, and how they brought up. So I think that's a great example of how we're harnessing more of that personalized stuff. And that's not just a book about growing up in the 80s. It's a book about how you grew up in the 80s and all your life experiences, right? And how your parents shares that. Also, and I think about my sister, and she has one child and another one on her way. And I think about how well documented that child's current life has been every single hour, every day, in the onslaught of photos that I get, let alone the ones that she has, about their individual story, which is very different than how we grew up, because we had film cameras, we didn't have the digital ones, right? But what she's able to build, these collages and things out of for her son's every single birthday, is absolutely amazing. And putting that, whether it's in print or it's digital or whatever, what have you. I think it's just the opportunities there's amazing, but giving them the appropriate outlet to be able to build these things, I think, is where our tech is quite key and we're able to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. You're listening to the Up Close and Personal podcast with me, Richard Askham, and my guest today, Kirk Lewis from HP. And Kirk, we've just been talking about the added value piece, and of course, this is really where this latest wave, if we can call it that, of personalization came in. Really, with Share a Coke, that sort of set the new ball rolling nearly 10 years ago now.
Really? Wow. Feels like yesterday.
and my question really is, what have you seen since that was better?
That one was extremely unique in and of its day, and that's I don't want to maybe have a commercial for the Coke one, but that hit a different a lot of pluses there, because it wasn't overt and it wasn't covert. It was right in that sweet spot, I think, right of where that was. A lot of other companies have done something similar with the technology from HP with Mosaic or Collage and kind of colorifying and personalizing that content, putting that things inside of it. So a lot of other good things in that way. But that campaign was pretty solid. I think continues to be that. So the one thing I did find though is that when you have the going into the store in the way it happened in Canada, the US here, you would go into the store itself and you would look for a name if you didn't go online and buy your own. Mm-hmm. And you ended up seeing a lot of the same names left over, and a lot of the names were gone. So there was a lot of whatever that name would be. So I'm like, a lot of people weren't named that as a child in those years. So you started picking up on what the popular names for kids were during those times versus not the other popular names. So it was interesting, depending on where you were in the US and Canada, what those name demographics were. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, that was one of the sort of I don't want to call it fails of the campaign because
No.
it was a successful campaign, but there were elements of it that you look back on and go, yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way. You know,
it's like, oh, there's not a lot of Tonys in St. Catherine's, I guess, because they're all sitting on the shelf, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that a lot of the value for Coke in that campaign was not sales, although that was a nice consequence.
Sure.
It was the connection that it made with the generation. You know, that by using their name, and I know I said earlier that your name is the least personal part about you. It's a good way to start a conversation, right? And I guess with brands today and the amount of noise in the marketplace compared to 9 years ago, you know, that's got to cut through. Shouting your name is probably a good way of getting your attention still, is it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It always makes you look up. Better than
especially if you're right. That's usually the case. But what would you say now in your experience of the last few years? You've seen the things that's worked, you've seen the things that haven't worked as well, shall we say. I don't think there's been any epic fails. There's been a few things that, as you said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But you know, is there anything that you've seen in the last couple of years that you think, okay, we're starting to see the pivot point now, and brands and retailers are using personalization much better than they have done previously?
Yeah, and I think it's still in the print world, but it's kind of in the additive manufacturing space. I think what we're doing kind of over there with either be orthotics or prosthetics, or even like with the safety gear and helmets, goggles, eyewear, these types of things, teeth, you know, for doing for corrective action, that kind of way. That's amazing what's kind of going on there in that world. Even building construction material or building homes, or I mean, that's all three additive. That's very, very personalized. So I think taking it to that degree, which you thought, 10 years ago, they're never going to be able to build me a custom, ski helmet or a set of goggles or a left leg, whatever it might be. But here we are, and that's happening today. So getting it to that sort of thing where it's like, wow, actually you're printing, limbs. I mean, wow, I would have never thought that. That's huge. And if we can do that and do that at a relatively, set scale, and make it exactly specifically perfect for how that individual walks or whatever it might be. To me, that was like, okay, wow, that's awesome. Now we can do that. What can't we do, right? Obviously, getting people into space obviously is the next one too. So we did that. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So just to wrap up, Kirk, give me an example of something that if it came out tomorrow and you could personalize it, what sort of thing would you rush to the store or rush to your keyboard to order? What does it for you as an individual?
What does it for me as an individual? If I could personalize it tomorrow, man. I don't know. Let me think about that one. Probably my car. Probably my car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhere where you spend a lot of time and having something that's for you and the nature of it and can set up, something that bugs me every day about my car is that the sound system that's in there doesn't appear to want to work with me. It wants to work with my daughter's phone. And instantly she gets in the car and goes, "Oh, she's here. I'll tune into her phone now." So I certainly like my car to recognize me as its owner.
I know I think it's the car because it's like you say, you spend a lot of time in it. It's not just the exterior of the car. I think a lot of it has to do with what you're doing inside of that car. Whether it be the seat, the climate, all that kind of fun stuff, and have that automatically set up as you said the way you want it. Would be the first thing that I would go out there and try to play around with, see if I could get something that was perfect, fit my rear end just exactly the way I want it to.
Brilliant. Listen, Kirk, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for taking the time and joining me on the Up Close and Personal podcast.
Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure.
See you soon.